Imagine a blade that fell from the heavens, harder than any metal on earth, yet feared by warriors who believed it carried the wrath of gods. A weapon that didn't come from any mine, any forge, or any human hand, but from the void of space itself. But the world of ancient weaponry holds far more than swords and spears crafted from earthly ore. Buried deep in the tombs of pharaohs and kings lie blades forged from fragments of dying stars, meteorites that crashed into our planet thousands of years ago. These weren't just weapons. They were objects of divine power, sharper and stronger than anything bronze or early iron could offer, with a shimmering, otherworldly pattern that no blacksmith could replicate. Warriors who wielded them believed they held the fury of the cosmos in their hands. And here's what makes this even more incredible. Modern analysis has proven that these meteorite weapons were actually superior to conventional blades of their time. The nickel-iron composition created an edge that could slice through bronze armor like cloth, and a durability that kept them sharp for centuries. Ancient civilizations across the globe, from Egypt to Greenland, from Turkey to China, independently discovered these fallen gifts from space and transformed them into legendary artifacts, each one steeped in mystery and carved into history by forgotten warriors. Today, we'll uncover 5 of the most extraordinary meteorite weapons ever forged, each one more incredible than the last. And the first one? It was buried with a boy king whose tomb held secrets that baffled archaeologists for nearly a century. Weapon 1. Tutankhamun's dagger from the stars. When Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, he found over 5,000 objects crammed into those chambers. Golden thrones, chariots, jewelry beyond imagination. But wrapped against the young pharaoh's mummified thigh, beneath layers of linen, lay a dagger that wouldn't reveal its true origin for another 94 years. The blade was 13 inches long, with a handle made of gold decorated with cloisonné and rock crystal. Beautiful, yes, but Egypt had hundreds of ceremonial daggers. What made this one different? The blade itself had a strange quality. It hadn't corroded. Not even slightly. After 3,300 years in a tomb, most iron would be rust and fragments. This dagger looked like it had been forged yesterday. For decades, Egyptologists assumed it was just exceptionally well-preserved iron. But here's where it gets fascinating. Egypt didn't have iron-smelting technology in 1323 BCE when Tutankhamun died. They were still in the Bronze Age. So where did this iron dagger come from? In 2016, Italian and Egyptian researchers finally had the answer. Using X-ray fluorescence spectrometry, they analyzed the blade's composition without damaging it. What they found was shocking. The dagger contained 10.8% nickel and 0.58% cobalt. That's the exact signature of iron meteorites. The blade in Tutankhamun's tomb wasn't forged from earthly ore. It was hammered from a chunk of space rock that fell from the sky. But here's the question that haunted researchers. Which meteorite? And how did ancient Egyptians even know they could work with it? Ancient Egyptian texts actually give us clues. They had a specific word for meteoric iron, biaen pet, which translates to iron from the sky. They knew these rocks fell from the heavens. They watched them streak across the night sky, trailing fire. To them, these weren't just rocks. They were gifts from the gods, pieces of the firmament itself, sent down to earth for a divine purpose. Finding one would have been like discovering a portal to the realm of the gods. And working with meteorite iron was incredibly difficult. Unlike terrestrial iron ore, which ancient civilizations eventually learned to smelt in furnaces, meteorite iron comes prealloyed with nickel. It's already metal, but it's also incredibly hard and brittle when cold. The only way to shape it is through repeated heating and hammering, a technique called hot forging. The blacksmith would have heated the meteorite fragment in charcoal fires, hammered it, reheated it, hammered it again, over and over, slowly coaxing the cosmic metal into the shape of a blade. Imagine the patience required. One wrong strike and the whole piece could shatter. These weren't weapons you could mass-produce. Each one took weeks, maybe months, of careful work. And the result? A blade that was not only harder and sharper than bronze, but that shimmered with a distinctive crystalline pattern called a Widmanstätten pattern, geometric lines that form naturally in meteoric iron as it cools over millions of years in space. No earthly metal has this pattern. Anyone who saw Tutankhamun's dagger would have immediately known. This came from beyond our world. Now, why would you bury such a precious weapon with a dead king? Because the ancient Egyptians believed the pharaoh needed to be armed in the afterlife. But they didn't give him just any weapon. They gave him the iron from the sky, the weapon of the gods themselves, to fight whatever cosmic battles awaited him in the realm of the dead. And this wasn't the only meteorite weapon found in Egypt. But before we explore the others, there's an even older civilization that discovered the secret of space iron. And they lived in one of the harshest environments on Earth, where metal of any asterisk kind was almost impossible to find. Which brings us to the frozen edge of the world. Weapon 2, the Cape York meteorite tools of the Inuit. Thousands of miles from Egypt's golden sands, in the frozen wastelands of northwestern Greenland, the Inuit people faced an impossible challenge. How do you create metal tools when there's no ore to mine, no wood to fuel a forge, and temperatures that plunge to 40 degrees below zero? Their solution fell from the sky approximately 10,000 years ago. The Cape York meteorite, one of the largest iron meteorites ever discovered, broke apart as it entered Earth's atmosphere and scattered fragments across the Greenland ice. The main mass, which the Inuit called Anagito or the tent, weighed 31 metric tons. But it was the smaller fragments, pieces they could actually work with, that changed everything for these Arctic hunters. For centuries, the Inuit guarded the location of these meteorite fragments as sacred knowledge. They would travel hundreds of miles across treacherous ice to reach them, then use tools made of stone and bone to chip off small pieces of the space iron. Think about that for a moment. They were hammering cosmic metal with rocks, in temperatures that could freeze exposed skin in minutes, because these fragments were the only source of workable iron in the entire region. But here's what makes this incredible. They succeeded. The Inuit became master craftsmen of meteorite iron, creating harpoon points, knife blades, and engraving tools that were far superior to anything made from bone or stone. A harpoon tipped with meteoric iron could punch through the thick hide of a walrus or seal with a single strike. A knife blade could cut through frozen meat and blubber without dulling. These weren't just better tools. They meant the difference between survival and starvation in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. And the Inuit knew exactly what these fragments were. Their oral histories, passed down through generations, spoke of a metal mountain that fell from the sky with such force that it shook the earth and sent up plumes of ice and steam. They believed the meteorite was a divine gift, placed there by their gods to help them survive the long Arctic winters. Some stories claimed the fragments still held the heat and fire of the stars themselves, and that working with them required spiritual preparation and respect. European explorers first heard rumors of these iron mountains in the early 1800s, but the Inuit refused to reveal their location. Why would they? These meteorites were their strategic resource, their technological advantage. Revealing them would be like giving away the location of the only gold mine in 1,000 miles. But in 1894, American explorer Robert Peary convinced an Inuit guide to lead him to the sites. What Peary found shocked him: 3 massive fragments, including the 31-ton Anagito. Against the protests of the local Inuit population, Peary spent 3 years figuring out how to transport these fragments back to New York. He eventually succeeded, using a specially built ship and railway tracks laid across the ice. The meteorites now sit in the American Museum of Natural History, where millions of visitors have marveled at them without ever knowing the full story of how they were used as weapons and tools for survival. Microscopic analysis of Inuit meteorite tools has revealed something remarkable. The cutting edges show distinctive patterns consistent with cutting through animal hide, bone, and frozen flesh. These weren't ceremonial objects kept for display. They were working tools, used daily, maintained and resharpened over years of brutal use. Some blade fragments have been dated to 800 to 900 years old, meaning they were crafted during medieval times and used continuously through some of the coldest periods in Earth's recent climate history. And here's the haunting part. When the meteorites were finally removed in the 1890s, the Inuit lost their only source of iron. Within a generation, the traditional knowledge of working meteoric iron began to fade. The tools that had sustained them for centuries became artifacts in museums, separated from the people who made them legendary. But if you think the Inuit story is remarkable, Wait until you hear about a weapon that was forged not in the frozen Arctic, but in the cradle of human civilization, a meteorite blade that predates even the pyramids and was discovered in a burial mound so ancient. It rewrites what we thought we knew about early metalworking. But before moving on, I would like to ask you for something. If you like these documentaries and want to support me, please consider subscribing. It's free. Weapon 3. The Alaka Hoyak Meteorite Dagger. In 1935, Turkish archaeologists excavating the ancient Hittite site of Alaka Hoyak made a discovery that would puzzle researchers for over 80 years. Inside a royal tomb dating to approximately 2500 BCE, that's 500 years asterisk before asterisk Tutankhamun, 500 years before the Iron Age even began, they found an iron-bladed dagger alongside bronze weapons, gold jewelry, and ceremonial objects. This should have been impossible. The Bronze Age is called the Bronze Age for a reason. Humans hadn't yet figured out how to smelt iron ore. The technology wouldn't be developed for another 1,000 years. So what was an iron dagger doing in a tomb from 2500 BCE? For decades, archaeologists debated this. Some suggested the tomb had been disturbed in later periods and the dagger was a later addition. Others thought it might be an early, experimental attempt at iron smelting. But there was something about the blade that didn't fit either explanation. The iron hadn't corroded the way terrestrial iron should have. The composition was off, wrong in a way that couldn't be explained by ancient smelting techniques. In 2017, researchers finally conducted a detailed analysis using portable X-ray fluorescence technology. The results were definitive. The dagger blade contained high concentrations of nickel and cobalt, along with trace amounts of germanium and gallium, the unmistakable chemical signature of meteoric iron. This wasn't smelted iron. This was forged from a meteorite that fell from space, then carefully shaped into a weapon by craftsmen who lived over 4,500 years ago. But here's what makes this discovery even more profound. The Alaka Hoyak dagger represents one of the earliest known examples of humans working with metallic iron of any kind. These ancient Anatolian craftsmen were pioneers, experimenting with a material that wouldn't be widely used for over a millennium. They didn't understand chemistry or metallurgy as we do today. They didn't know about nickel alloys or crystalline structures. But they understood something fundamental. This metal that fell from the sky was different. Harder. Stronger. Worth the immense effort required to shape it. The burial context tells us even more. The dagger was placed in a royal tomb alongside the community's most precious possessions. Gold solar discs, bronze standards decorated with sacred animals, and elaborate jewelry that would have taken master craftsmen months to create. The message was clear. This meteorite dagger was considered as valuable, perhaps more valuable, than gold itself. It was a status symbol that declared the tomb's occupant wasn't just wealthy. They wielded power that came from the heavens. And working with this meteoric iron would have been an extraordinary technical challenge. Without iron smelting technology, the craftsmen couldn't melt the meteorite down and pour it into molds like they could with bronze. They had to use the same cold hammering and hot forging techniques the Egyptians would later employ, but with even more primitive tools. Imagine heating a chunk of space rock in a charcoal fire, hammering it with stone tools, heating it again, hammering it again, slowly transforming a jagged meteorite fragment into a symmetrical, functional blade. One mistake and the whole piece could shatter. The patience and skill required would have been phenomenal. There's also evidence that these early metalworkers understood they were dealing with something special. Analysis of the blade shows it was carefully shaped to maximize the natural strength of the meteorite's crystalline structure. The edge alignment follows the grain of the Widmanstätten pattern, those geometric lines that form in meteorite iron as it cools in space. This wasn't random. The craftsmen were reading the metal, understanding its internal structure, working with it rather than against it. That's a level of metallurgical sophistication we didn't think existed in 2500 BCE. But why would an ancient civilization invest so much effort into a single blade? Because it wasn't just a weapon. It was proof of divine favor. In ancient Anatolia, as in Egypt and countless other cultures, meteorites were seen as messages from the gods. The sky was the realm of the divine, and anything that fell from it carried sacred power. A weapon forged from sky iron wasn't just sharp, it was blessed. It carried the authority of heaven itself. And this dagger proves something else. The knowledge of working meteorite iron spread far and wide across the ancient world, independently discovered by cultures separated by thousands of miles and hundreds of years. But there's one civilization that took this cosmic metalworking to an entirely different level. A culture that didn't just forge weapons from meteorites, but created sacred swords so legendary that their very existence was questioned by historians for centuries. That story takes us to the Far East. Weapon 4. The Chinese Meteor Iron Sword of Emperor Wu. In 109 BCE, during the reign of Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty, Chinese astronomers recorded a spectacular celestial event. A massive meteor shower that lit up the night sky for 3 consecutive nights. The imperial court interpreted this as a cosmic omen, and shortly afterward, fragments of meteoric iron were reportedly recovered from the Shaanxi province. What happened next became the stuff of legend. According to ancient Chinese texts, Emperor Wu commissioned his master swordsmith to forge a blade from these heavenly fragments, a weapon that would embody the mandate of heaven itself. The resulting sword, known as the Meteor Iron Sword or Tiantiajian, was said to possess supernatural cutting power and an edge that never dulled. For nearly 2,000 years, this story was dismissed as myth. Ancient Chinese literature is filled with legendary swords, magic blades that could cut through stone, swords that sang when drawn, weapons forged by immortals in the mountains. Historians assumed the Meteor Iron Sword was just another fantasy, exaggerated propaganda meant to legitimize an emperor's rule. Then, in 1976, archaeologists excavating Han Dynasty tombs in Hebei province found something extraordinary. An iron sword, remarkably well preserved, with unusual decorative patterns along the blade. The sword's surface showed geometric crystalline structures that didn't match any known terrestrial iron of that period. Initial analysis suggested it might be meteoric, but the technology to prove it definitively didn't exist yet. Fast forward to 2019. Using advanced scanning electron microscopy and mass spectrometry, researchers finally analyzed the sword's composition in detail. The verdict was clear: high nickel content, octahedral crystal structures, trace elements of cobalt and phosphorus. This was absolutely meteoric iron. The legendary Meteor Iron Sword of Emperor Wu wasn't a myth. It was real. But here's where the story gets even more fascinating. The sword's craftsmanship reveals a level of metallurgical sophistication that was centuries ahead of its time. The blade shows evidence of pattern welding, a technique where the meteorite iron was heated, folded, and hammered repeatedly to create layers of metal with different properties. The edge was harder and could hold a sharper angle, while the spine remained more flexible to absorb impact. This is the same basic principle behind later Japanese katana construction, but it was being done in China over 1,000 years earlier. The Chinese had developed techniques for working meteorite iron that were fundamentally different from those used in Egypt or Anatolia. Rather than simply hammering the raw meteorite into shape, Chinese smiths understood they could improve the metal's properties through controlled heating and folding. Each fold doubled the number of layers, and the process could be repeated dozens of times. Some estimates suggest the Meteor Iron Sword may have had over 256 layers of folded metal, creating a blade that was both incredibly sharp and remarkably durable. Ancient Chinese metallurgical texts give us clues about why they went to such extraordinary lengths. They understood, not in chemical terms, but through observation and experimentation, that iron from the sky had different properties than iron from the earth. They noted that sky iron was harder, held an edge longer, and had a distinctive shimmering appearance when polished. They also believed it carried qi or vital energy from the celestial realm, making it not just a superior material, but a spiritually powerful one. The sword's discovery also tells us something important about ancient trade networks and knowledge transfer. The techniques used to forge Emperor Wu's blade show influences from across Asia. The pattern welding resembles methods used in Indian wood steel production. The decorative elements incorporate Central Asian motifs, and the overall design philosophy echoes earlier Scythian metallurgy. This wasn't isolated innovation. This was a convergence of ideas, techniques, and materials from across the ancient world, all brought together to create a single legendary weapon. And the timing matters. 109 BCE was a period of massive expansion for the Han Dynasty. Emperor Wu was pushing the empire's borders westward, opening the Silk Road, coming into conflict with the Xiongnu nomads. He needed weapons that could match the superior cavalry and metalworking of the steppe peoples. A sword forged from meteorite iron, harder, sharper, and more durable than conventional weapons, wasn't just a symbol of imperial power. It was a strategic advantage. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about this sword is what it tells us about ancient Chinese astronomy and geology. The fact that they could identify meteorite fragments, recover them, and recognize their potential as raw material for weapons means they were carefully observing and documenting celestial events. They understood, at some level, that these rocks falling from the sky were different from ordinary stones. They were systematic enough to collect them and experimental enough to try forging them into tools and weapons. This level of scientific observation and practical application wouldn't be seen in Europe until the Age of Enlightenment, over 1,500 years later. Yet here it was, happening in Han Dynasty China, creating weapons that would be rediscovered by archaeologists in the modern era and confirmed as authentic using technology the ancient smiths could never have imagined. But there's one more meteorite weapon we need to discuss. One that combines everything we've learned so far and adds a twist that makes it perhaps the most significant of all. Because this weapon wasn't just forged from space iron and wielded by ancient warriors. It was part of a sacred ritual that connected the earth, the sky, and the divine in a way that fundamentally shaped an entire civilization's understanding of power and legitimacy. That story takes us to one of the most mysterious cultures in ancient history. Weapon 5, the ceremonial axe of the Mitanni Kingdom. In the mid-14th century BCE, in the northern reaches of Mesopotamia, the Mitanni Kingdom was one of the great powers of the ancient world. They rivaled Egypt, traded with the Hittites, and controlled vast territories spanning what is now Syria, southeastern Turkey, and northern Iraq. But their power wasn't just military or economic. It was deeply tied to religious authority and cosmic legitimacy. In 1986, Syrian archaeologists excavating the ancient Mitanni capital of Wasukani, modern Tel El Fakhariya, discovered a royal burial chamber that had somehow escaped looters for over 3,000 years. Inside, alongside gold jewelry, cylinder seals, and ceremonial vessels, they found a weapon that would rewrite our understanding of Mitanni religious practices. A double-bladed ceremonial axe with a blade forged from meteoric iron. The axe was extraordinary for several reasons. First, it was massive. The blade alone weighed nearly 5 pounds, and the entire weapon with its cedar would handle would have been over 3 feet long. This wasn't a practical battle weapon. It was far too heavy for combat, too ornate for everyday use. This was a ceremonial object, designed to be impressive, designed to command attention and inspire awe. Second, the blade's composition was unlike anything else found in Mitanni archaeological contexts. Analysis revealed it was forged from an iron-nickel alloy with over 7% nickel content, definitively meteoric. But more than that, the blade showed evidence of multiple meteorite sources being combined. The cutting edges had a different nickel concentration than the central portion of the blade, suggesting that fragments from at least 2 different meteorites had been worked together and forge-welded into a single weapon. Think about what that means. The Mitanni craftsmen weren't just working with whatever meteorite fragment they could find. They were selectively combining different cosmic metals, possibly because they understood, through trial and error, that different meteorites had different properties. They were experimenting, optimizing, creating a composite blade that was stronger than any single meteorite fragment could produce. This is materials science at a level we didn't think existed in the Bronze Age. But the third remarkable feature of this axe goes beyond metallurgy. The blade was inscribed with cuneiform text, one of the longest cuneiform inscriptions ever found on a metal weapon. And what the inscription says is absolutely fascinating. It describes the axe as the weapon of Teshub, the Mitanni storm god, and states that it was forged from the stone that fell with thunder and fire from the heavens during the reign of King Shatana II. The inscription then details the axe's purpose. It was to be wielded by the king during the annual Festival of the Sky, a ceremony where the Mitanni ruler would symbolically strike a stone altar with the meteorite axe, demonstrating his connection to the storm god and his right to rule. The ritual was meant to show that the king's authority didn't just come from military strength or lineage. It came directly from the heavens, literally embodied in a weapon forged from fallen stars. This gives us insight into something profound about ancient political theology. The Mitanni weren't unique in believing that rulers derived their legitimacy from divine sources. Every ancient civilization had some version of this idea. But the Mitanni took it a step further. They had physical, tangible proof. They could point to the meteorite axe and say, "This metal fell from the realm of the gods. Our king wields it. Therefore, our king is chosen by the gods." It was propaganda, yes, but propaganda backed by a genuine cosmic artifact that no one could deny or replicate. The ceremony itself must have been spectacular. Imagine the scene: the stone temple with its massive altars, the gathered nobility and priesthood, the crowds of common people held back by guards. The king would enter, dressed in ceremonial regalia, carrying the meteorite axe. When sunlight hit the polished blade, it would shimmer with that distinctive Widmanstätten pattern, those geometric lines that proved it came from beyond the earth. The king would raise the axe high, and then bring it crashing down onto the stone altar. The impact would send sparks flying. Meteorite iron contains enough nickel to create bright sparks when struck against stone, creating a visual effect that must have seemed magical to ancient observers. And here's what makes this even more clever. The ritual was renewable. Unlike a single dramatic moment like a coronation, the Festival of the Sky happened annually. Every year, the king had to prove his divine mandate by wielding the sky metal. It kept the religious and political power structure constantly reinforced, constantly visible to the entire population. The axe wasn't just a symbol kept locked in a treasury, it was an active tool of governance. Modern metallurgical analysis has revealed another layer to this story. The blade shows distinctive wear patterns consistent with repeated striking against hard stone. The inscription wasn't just symbolic. The axe was actually used, over and over, for the exact purpose described in the text. The edges are battered and chipped in ways that match the physical forces of being swung against stone altars. This weapon was part of living ritual, performed for decades, possibly for over a century, until the Mitanni kingdom finally collapsed around 1300 BCE. The fate of the axe after the kingdom fell remains unclear. It was buried in the royal tomb, possibly during the final chaotic years as Mitanni power crumbled before Assyrian expansion. Someone, maybe the last priest-king, maybe a loyal servant, decided this sacred weapon couldn't fall into enemy hands. Better to hide it, to bury it with its owner, to seal it away until the gods decided it was time for it to be found again. And found it was, 3,300 years later, by archaeologists who could finally understand and verify what the ancient inscription claimed. This blade was truly forged from the heavens. The cosmic iron that ancient kings had wielded as proof of divine right could now be analyzed, measured, and confirmed with technologies that would have seemed like magic to the Mitanni themselves. But that's the beautiful irony of these meteorite weapons. To the ancient world, they were magical, gifts from gods, proof of cosmic favor, weapons that connected earth and sky. To the modern world, they're scientific marvels, evidence of ancient metallurgical sophistication, proof that our ancestors were far more observant and innovative than we often give them credit for. Both perspectives are true. These weapons are simultaneously supernatural and natural, legendary and historical, impossible and verified. From Tutankhamun's dagger to the Mitanni ceremonial axe, these 5 weapons tell a single, interconnected story. Humanity has always looked to the stars with wonder, and when pieces of those stars fell to Earth, we transformed them into tools of power, symbols of legitimacy, and connections to the divine. These weren't just weapons. They were our first attempts to reach beyond our world, to hold cosmic power in our hands, to forge something eternal from the raw materials of the universe itself. And in doing so, ancient craftsmen, working with nothing but fire, stone hammers, and extraordinary patience, created objects that still inspire thousands of years later. If you enjoyed uncovering these cosmic weapons from history, consider subscribing to explore more of the ancient world's greatest mysteries.